He stands on stage under blinding lights, the roar of thousands pressing against him, yet his eyes are distant, haunted by decades of ghosts. In those moments, his battered voice still soars through arena air, but inside he is already far from this moment. Behind the adoring screams and the legacy of soaring guitar anthems lies a man who never shook the shadows of his childhood. A boy who learned early on that the world could hurt as fiercely as it could love. In a tidy suburban home on the edges of Chicago, 3-year-old William Patrick Corgan, he would become Billy Corgan to the world, trembled at strange, sudden anger. He worshipped music in church choir, and yet his home was anything but sacred. Billy would recall how his father, a roguish rock musician with guitars on the walls and guns in the glove compartment, told him that the abuse he suffered was somehow good, shaping him into a true artist. It is hard to forget a father's words like that. So he grew up simultaneously believing he was both blessed with a gift and cursed with a destiny. There was love, too. He insists he loved his father, even as his heart ached. He and his brother would pretend their Bronx apartment was a field of home runs, but inside, Billy already knew he was living someone else's story. He was smart, tall, awkwardly adenoidal, and unnaturally pious for a child who had seen the ugliest of human nature so early. He learned that the only place to hide was inside his own head, strumming the sorrow out of a borrowed guitar. By age 10, he was hooked. Every spare moment he pressed fingers to strings, hearing in each aching chord an echo of the chaos at home. As a teenager, Billy finally bolted from the toxic carousel of his childhood. He rode south to Florida with a punk band, The Marked. But it wasn't long before something louder and bigger stirred in him. Returning to Chicago in his late teens, he took a job in a dingy record store and poured his loneliness into music more fervently than ever. He sketched the name Smashing Pumpkins on the wall of his apartment and began writing songs with singer-guitarist James Iha in a bedroom crammed with amps and cigarette smoke. In basement bars with a tinny drum machine pounding out a rhythm, the two outsiders, one brash and one quiet, found a kind of kinship. When jazz enthusiast Jimmy Chamberlin bounded into their circle on drums, it was as if the missing heartbeat of that fledgling band had finally arrived. Billy would later joke in interviews that he was in love with his sadness. But in those fledgling days, it was more like a nervous dance with despair. Every lyric was spit out or whispered, as if letting the poison out of his veins, rather than on stage for the crowd. The other band members felt it too. They all knew he was a perfectionist, spending long nights in the studio overdubbing parts, going over lyrics, chasing sounds. He played most of the guitars and bass on Siamese Dream himself, wearing down the vinyl with his obsession. It took months and countless cigarettes and a small fortune borrowed on credit cards before the album felt right. Billy's cheeks were torn with a wild grin on hearing it hit the Billboard Top 10. But behind the lens of his own memory, it felt more like exhaling from a depth he never intended to traverse. Suddenly, he had everything he thought he wanted: platinum records, sold-out tours, and MTV glory. Yet, the glittering success came at a crushing price. In 1996, just as Melancholy was still spinning out singles on the radio, Billy found himself staring down at his friend's lifeless body, the smell of burned cotton still in the air. In an interview after, Billy admitted without remorse that continuing the tour was the worst decision he'd ever made, haunting him for years. Meanwhile, offstage, other pillars were crumbling too. In December of that same brutal year, his mother died. The woman whose childhood lullabies had competed against nightmares was gone. Just before that, His wife of 4 years, from a marriage he once told only insiders was unhappy, had asked him for a divorce. Divorce filings bear a date, but in his head there was just winter, an avalanche of old pain returning. By the time Billy was 29, his tower was aflame. A wife leaving, a mother gone, a band torn at the core. Suddenly, there were no pumpkins. The silence after that Metro show was overwhelming for him. For all that noise and adrenaline on stage, backstage he hit rock bottom. Years of turmoil caught up. He bruised his hands from clenching them so hard, his heart itself felt bruised. Once a songwriter who refused to choose between heavy and tender, he refused to stop writing, recording, wrestling with new projects, even forming a wrestling league in truth, as if battling his inner turmoil in the ring. He said he didn't stave off addiction. He just found different poisons, like the compulsion to always be busy, to never sit still. Personal life gave no rest either. He entered marriage and divorce twice, each wife struggling to share his ghost-haunted world. A brief public romance with a famous singer ended with unfathomable cruelty in year 2006, when he moved into her mansion, only to end up ranting on Twitter about betrayal over leaked album tracks years later. Even friendships were complicated. People who saw him play often wondered why he earned nicknames like Internet Troll. In truth, he kept a jagged shield up, sometimes defensively curt in interviews, sometimes lashing out with words. Yet those words often hid real loneliness. He missed friends who drifted away or died, the overdose of Jonathan on the bus, the divorce from Darcy, even the fractured bond with Iha during the 2000s period. By 2018, when age 51 rolled around, Billy summoned most of the original Pumpkins on stage once more for their reunion tour. Everyone except Darcy, their old chemistry missing a note without her. It felt like another ending even as it was a return. Another reminder that time had taken pieces of them they could never reclaim. Through it all, there have been small lights. In 2024, he and his current wife welcomed their third child, a baby daughter arriving just after his 57th birthday. At home, between tour dates, he sits with his wide-eyed children and finally tries to give them something the world rarely saw when he was young: tenderness without pain. He has told his kids stories of his father's failings, so they know he isn't a monster. "No, no," he corrects them gently. "I love my dad. I love my father." It's the hardest story, he admits, but he tells it to break the cycle of silence. Perhaps for the first time, he is learning to see himself not as a shattered boy or angry rock star, but as a man who has survived absolutely everything life could throw at him. Tonight, he ends the set with one last acoustic song, something quiet and new, folding the audience into a gentler space. The floodlights fade as the applause dies down, and he stands there for a moment longer, listening to the hum of the emptying stadium. In that silence, you can almost see every ghost: his bruised mother, the friends he lost, every childhood fear, dimming into the shadows. Billy Corgan is no saint. He won't pretend that he's free of scars. But in these backstage whispers, he is not the villain that tabloid tales would make him out to be. He is a broken child who learned to channel that hurt into the music that saved him. Every live chord is a confession, every lyric a small triumph over the darkness. A close observer would tell you, he has weathered storms most people can't imagine. And yet, he endures, turning tragedy into melody, so that even if he can't erase his past, he can remake it into something painfully, achingly beautiful for anyone who listens.